My Deaf Mom, the Cop, and the Law. So last night I was chatting with my mom over Skype. My mom's deaf. And she told me a surprising story of something that happened to her when she got pulled over. So one night, she was on a route that was super familiar to her, that she goes on all the time. It's a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and she was going about 29, so not really speeding. She had my 92-year-old grandmother in the car and her husband. And up ahead, she saw a motorcycle cop, uh, parked up ahead. But since she wasn't speeding, she didn't think much of it. But as she passed, the cop pulled up behind her with his lights going. So she wasn't going fast, so she thought he couldn't be after her. So she got out of the way, or she tried to get out of the way. And he followed her car over to the one side of the road and then to the other. And so then she realized maybe he was after um, pulling her over. So she pulled the car over. He pulled up behind her and came up to the window. She rolled down the window and he started talking at her. And she indicated she couldn't hear and that her husband uh, was deaf too and that they preferred to sign. And the officer kept talking at her. So she turned to her husband and was signing with him. And when the officer saw that, he realized, I guess, that she was deaf. So when she turned back to face the officer, he slowly sort of said, "Can you read my lips?" And she indicated that no, that wasn't going to cut it with communication, and he kept going talking. And she kept saying that she wasn't clear on what he was saying, and she felt that she wasn't clear on why he'd pulled her over because she wasn't speeding, and so they were kind of going back and forth. But as I said, the communication wasn't clear, and the officer made absolutely no effort to find a different way to communicate by pulling out a pad and pen or being able to write back and forth, that kind of stuff. So he demanded her driver's license, which she gave him. She knows that she got that was clear because she knows that handing over your license is part of interactions with the cops when you get pulled over. So he took the license back, did what he had to do, came back to the car with a ticket in hand. So the ticket was written in really fine print, which was hard for my mother to read. In Nevada, I don't know what the tickets look like there, but I know that my mother couldn't read it because the writing was too fine. But the officer insisted that she sign it then and there. Where I live, the state I live, you don't have to sign anything on the spot. You have the time to take it home and look it over, and check whether you want to plead guilty or not guilty before you sign anything. But um, in this case, the officer insisted that she sign it now, but she didn't agree because she didn't agree with being pulled over. She was going 29 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and excuse me, the officer didn't have any radar or any proof of her speeding. So, but the officer gestured and indicated that she had to sign the ticket, sign the ticket, sign the ticket. So my mom put her foot down and said, "Okay, I want an interpreter." Because they'd been struggling back and forth the whole time, and the officer had made no effort to communicate in any way but talking at her. So I know that in Nevada, the state law dictates that if a Spanish interpreter is necessary, they have one on call to be, called out to scenes whenever they're necessary. So it's got to be the same thing with an ASL interpreter, right? Because they weren't able to understand each other at all. So eventually it came down to the officer telling my mother that You want to fight it in court? My mom said that, she refused to sign it. So she said, well, what happens if I don't sign it? And the officer said, you're going to jail. So my mother said, oh, okay, you want to take me to jail? Fine. You have to drive my husband home and my grandmother, or the grandmother in the back of the car. So they struggled back and forth, for a while longer. And finally, my mother just gave up and thought, okay, I'll sign it. She didn't use her real signature to indicate that she didn't agree, but she told me later that she realized later that what she should have added was, I do not understand why I'm getting this ticket, and added her signature to that statement. So that would have helped with her case. Anyway, my mom went home feeling pretty annoyed, pretty surprised at what had happened. And she has a friend who is a police officer also, who's hearing, and she's learning to become an interpreter. So she spoke to this friend to figure out what to do. And the friend suggested that she go in to internal affairs and lodge a complaint against this officer, which she did. She went in, she lodged a complaint, and they said, yeah, internal affairs said that the Nevada law requires that an interpreter be provided when you get a ticket. So that was interesting. So curious to know what your states are too, because the ADA doesn't make specific provisions. It's so your state decides the law with regard to these situations, but I found that some states require the provision of an interpreter, and in some places, if the officer makes no effort to communicate, doesn't offer to write or use notepads and whatnot back and forth to make themselves understood, that means that you have a case, that you might have a case. So yeah, check about the requirements of your state with regard to the provision of interpreters when you get a ticket. Oh, by the way, I forgot to add that ticket that my mom got that was hard for her to see. Remember that? When she did read it, she found that the ticket was for $300 and said she was going 40 miles an hour in this 25-mile-an-hour zone. And the ticket said that there were construction workers there. They weren't even there. There were no workers there whatsoever. But the ticket actually lied and said that there were construction workers on site. So that was it. So we have to go through the process, and we'll let you know what happens, what the result is, if they support our case or not. Also, it was interesting, as I was sort of reading up on this, I found a police forum where different police officers contribute to this forum. They post on this forum, and they were asking stuff like, deaf people can drive? Or you mean they're allowed to get their licenses, to have their licenses? So you should, when they pull deaf people over, they should make sure that their licenses are validated. So from what I can see, they're pretty behind in their views, and we have a lot of work to do. So we as a community should go in and post on these forums, and because it's time to take some action to change their perspective.